The scream from the living room wasn't just a sound, it was the frequency of a plan shattering. 30 minutes ago, my mother-in-law, Phyllis, had hovered over me, her eyes glittering as she insisted I eat the special herbal pancakes she'd prepared to cure my morning sickness. She didn't see my hands shake as I swapped my plate with her son's while she checked the kettle. Now Tyler was the one convulsing on the floor, and Phyllis wasn't looking at him with concern. She was staring at his empty plate with pure, unadulterated terror. I sat frozen at the dining table, my hands gripping the edge of the placemat so hard my fingernails were turning white. The ceramic crash that followed the scream echoed in my ears like a gunshot. It was the sound of a coffee mug hitting the hardwood, shattering into 1,000 jagged pieces, much like the reality I had been living in for the past 3 years. I didn't move. I couldn't. My body felt heavy, anchored by a terrifying mixture of guilt and vindication. I had done this. Technically, I hadn't fed him the food, but I had made the switch. I had looked at the plate of scrambled eggs peppered with those dark, bitter-smelling herbs, the ones Phyllis swore were an ancient family remedy, and my stomach had lurched with a violent, primal rejection. It wasn't just nausea. It was a warning bell ringing deep in my lizard brain. So, when she turned to the stove to pour the tea, and Tyler was busy thumbing through emails on his phone, I switched them. It took less than 3 seconds. And now, 30 minutes later, the man I married was on the floor. "Tyler!" Phyllis's voice was a shrill weapon, cutting through the stagnant air of the house. I forced myself to stand. My legs felt like they were made of water. I walked into the living room, my steps slow, almost dreamlike. Tyler was on the Persian rug, his body arching in an unnatural, rigid bow. His eyes were rolled back, showing only the whites, and foam was beginning to gather at the corners of his mouth. It looked like a scene from a horror movie, but it was happening in my living room, on the rug we bought on our honeymoon. Phyllis was standing over him. She wasn't holding his hand. She wasn't checking his airway. She was gripping the back of the sofa, her knuckles white, her face drained of all color. She looked like a statue of panic, but when I looked closer, I realized it wasn't the panic of a mother watching her child suffer. It was the panic of a conductor watching a train derail. She looked up and saw me. For a split second, the mask slipped. There was no sweet old lady in her eyes. There was only venom, pure, concentrated hatred. She looked from me to Tyler, and then back to the dining room where the empty plate still sat on the table. "You," she whispered. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. "What's happening?" I asked, my voice trembling. I had to play the part. I had to pretend I was just the confused, pregnant wife. "Phyllis, what's wrong with him?" "He ate." She stopped herself. Her eyes darted around the room, calculating, processing. She couldn't say it. She couldn't say, "He ate the poison I made for you." "He's having a seizure," I said, the medical term feeling foreign and cold in my mouth. "We need to call 911. "No!" Phyllis lunged forward, grabbing my wrist as I reached for the landline on the side table. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her nails digging into my skin. "Don't be dramatic, Audrey. He's just faint. He's been working too hard. The sirens will upset him." I looked down at her hand on my wrist, then at Tyler, who was now thrashing rhythmically against the floorboards. A heavy, wet, gargling sound was coming from his throat. "He's not fainting, Phyllis," I said, pulling my arm back. "He's dying. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you." I snatched the cordless phone from the cradle. My fingers fumbled over the buttons. 911, green button. "Audrey, put the phone down," Phyllis hissed. She was right beside me, her voice dropping to that dangerous low register she usually reserved for when I loaded the dishwasher incorrectly or bought the wrong brand of almond milk. "You're overreacting. It's your hormones. You're hysterical." "Emergency services. What is the address of your emergency?" The dispatcher's voice was calm, a lifeline in the chaos. 1242 Oak Ridge Drive, I stammered, turning my back on Phyllis. My husband collapsed. He's seizing. He's convulsing on the floor. Is he conscious, ma'am? No. He's making sounds, but he's not waking up. We have a unit dispatched. They're 3 minutes out. I need you to clear the area around him. Make sure he doesn't hit his head. I looked back at Tyler. He had stopped thrashing and was now twitching, his breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. Phyllis was finally kneeling beside him, but she was patting his face in a way that looked more like she was trying to wake him up for a meeting than saving his life. "Tyler, wake up," she was muttering. "Wake up, you idiot. Wake up right now." "The ambulance is coming," I told the dispatcher, but I was looking at Phyllis. He's turning blue. "Ma'am, stay on the line." I lowered the phone slightly. "Phyllis, move the coffee table. The operator said to clear the area." Phyllis snapped her head up. Her perfectly coiffed silver bob was disheveled now, strands of hair sticking to her forehead. "I know how to take care of my own son, Audrey. I don't need you barking orders at me. You're making things worse. Look at you. You're shaking. You're going to hurt the baby with all this stress." There it was, the toxic benevolence. The weaponized concern. Even with her son potentially dying on the floor, she couldn't resist twisting the knife. She wanted me to feel like I was the problem, like my fear was the danger, not the toxic substance coursing through Tyler's veins. "Just move the table," I screamed. The volume of my own voice shocked me. I never screamed. I was the quiet one, the compliant one, the orphan heiress who was just so grateful to be part of a family. Phyllis flinched, looking at me as if I had slapped her. For a moment, she looked genuinely afraid of me. She shoved the heavy oak coffee table aside with a grunt of exertion, the legs screeching against the wood floor. I went back to the phone. "He's still seizing. It's been, 2 minutes? Okay, help is almost there. Can you unlock the front door?" "I'll do it," Phyllis said, scrambling to her feet. "I'll go." I watched her run to the foyer. Why was she so eager to get to the door? Was she going to let them in, or was she going to try to spin the story before they even stepped inside? My mind was racing, connecting dots I hadn't even realized were there. The special teas she'd been making me for months. The way my morning sickness always got worse an hour after breakfast. The way she and Tyler would exchange glances when I stumbled to the bathroom to vomit. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. I wasn't just sick, I was being poisoned. And I had just deflected the bullet into the chest of the man I loved. The sirens were deafening as they pulled into the driveway. Red and white lights flashed through the bay window, painting the living room in a chaotic, strobing rhythm. 2 paramedics burst through the front door, carrying heavy bags and a portable stretcher. They pushed past Phyllis, who was wringing her hands in the hallway, and knelt beside Tyler. "Male, roughly 30 years old, seizing upon arrival," the first paramedic shouted to his partner. He was a large man with a calm, efficient face. He shined a light into Tyler's eyes. "Pupils are blown. Airway is compromised." I stood in the corner, clutching my stomach. My baby. I felt a kick, strong and reassuring, against my ribs. "We're okay," I thought. "We didn't eat it." "We need to transport immediately," the second paramedic said. They worked with practiced speed, lifting Tyler onto the stretcher. His limbs were limp now, dead weight. As they wheeled him toward the door, I grabbed my purse from the entry table. "I'm coming with him." Phyllis stepped in front of me, blocking the doorway. She was shorter than me, but in that moment she felt like a wall of concrete. She placed her hands on my shoulders, her grip firm and patronizing. "Audrey, sweetheart, no," she said, her voice dripping with that sickly, sweet syrup she used to mask the taste of arsenic. "You can't go in the ambulance. It's too bumpy, too chaotic. Think of the baby. You're clearly in shock. You're trembling." "I'm his wife," I said, trying to step around her. "Move, Phyllis." "I'm his mother," she snapped, her voice cracking. "And I'm telling you, it's not safe for you. You stay here. I'll go with him. You can drive yourself later when you've calmed down, when you're not so hysterical." She was trying to separate us. She didn't want me in that ambulance. She didn't want me talking to the paramedics. She wanted to control the narrative. If I stayed behind, she could tell them anything. She could tell them he had a history of seizures. She could tell them he was stressed. She could tell them I had fed him something bad. "I'm going," I said, my voice low. "Look at you." Phyllis gestured to my body. "You're a mess. You're pale. You're going to faint, and then the paramedics will have 2 patients instead of 1. Don't be selfish, Audrey. For once in your life, don't be selfish." Selfish. The word hit me like a physical blow. For 3 years, I had given them everything. My money, my trust, my dignity. I had let her redecorate my house. I had let her critique my clothes. I had let her isolate me from my friends. And she had the audacity to call me selfish while her son lay dying from her own poison. I didn't argue. I didn't try to reason with her. I just used my weight. I was 5 months pregnant and angry. I lowered my shoulder and shoved past her. She stumbled back, hitting her hip against the doorframe with a gasp of shock. "Ma'am, are you coming?" the paramedic shouted from the back of the ambulance. "Yes," I yelled, running down the steps. "I'm coming." I climbed into the back of the rig. Phyllis was right behind me, recovering quickly. "Family only," the paramedic said, looking at the crowded space. "1 person." "I'm his mother," Phyllis shrieked. "I'm his wife," I said, sitting on the bench seat and looking the paramedic in the eye. "And I'm pregnant. I'm not driving." The paramedic looked between us, sensing the tension. He looked at Phyllis, who was vibrating with rage, and then at me, clutching my belly. "Mom, you follow in the car," he said firmly to Phyllis. "Wife stays." He slammed the doors shut before Phyllis could protest. Through the rear window, I saw her standing in the driveway, illuminated by the flashing lights. She wasn't looking at the ambulance with worry. She was pulling her phone out of her pocket, dialing furiously. The inside of the ambulance smelled of rubbing alcohol, diesel exhaust, and stale sweat. The vehicle lurched as the driver accelerated, and I had to grab the overhead strap to steady myself. Tyler was strapped to the gurney, an oxygen mask over his face. The paramedic was working quickly, inserting an IV line into the crook of Tyler's arm. "Does he have any allergies?" the paramedic asked, not looking up. "No," I said. "None." "Is he on any medication? History of epilepsy? Heart conditions?" "No, he's healthy. He runs marathons. He's never been sick like this." I watched Tyler's chest rise and fall. It was jerky, uneven. I looked at his hands, the same hands that had held mine at the altar, the same hands that had signed the mortgage papers on the house my father's trust paid for. A memory flashed in my mind. 3 weeks ago, I was at the top of the stairs. Phyllis had bumped into me. I fell. Tyler had come out of his office. He hadn't asked if I was okay. He had asked, "What did you do now?" He had looked annoyed. Not worried. Annoyed. I looked at his face now. It was pale, gray almost. "I did this," a voice in my head whispered. I switched the plates. But another voice, louder and angrier, answered back. "No, you didn't put the poison in the food. You just refused to eat it. If I hadn't switched the plates, that would be me on the stretcher. I would be the one seizing. I would be the one dying. And Phyllis? She would be holding Tyler's hand in the waiting room, crying fake tears, telling everyone how tragic it was that poor, unstable Audrey had lost the baby and her mind. I felt a wave of nausea roll over me. I leaned forward, putting my head between my knees. "You okay?" the paramedic asked. "Morning sickness," I lied. It wasn't a lie entirely. I was sick with the realization that my entire life was a lie. "We're 2 minutes out," the driver called from the front. I sat up and looked at Tyler again. "What do you think it is?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The paramedic checked a monitor. "Heart rate is erratic. BP is through the roof. Honestly, it looks like a toxicity response, like an overdose or something environmental. Toxicity. He ate breakfast, I said, testing the words. Just breakfast. Food poisoning doesn't usually hit this fast or this hard, the paramedic said, shaking his head, unless it was something serious. Did he eat anything unusual? Wild mushrooms? Shellfish? No, I said. Just eggs. I didn't mention the herbs. Not yet. I was afraid. Afraid that if I said it out loud, it would become real. Afraid that Phyllis would find a way to twist it back on me. Audrey collected the herbs from the garden. Audrey cooked the eggs. I needed to be careful. I was in a cage with tigers, and I had just poked one of them in the eye. The emergency room waiting area was a purgatory of beige chairs and flickering fluorescent lights. They had whisked Tyler away through the double doors immediately. "Code blue!" someone had shouted. That meant his heart had stopped, didn't it? Or maybe it meant he wasn't breathing. I sat in one of the hard plastic chairs, my purse hugged tight to my chest. Phyllis had arrived 10 minutes after the ambulance. She hadn't come over to sit with me. She hadn't asked for an update. She was standing in the far corner of the room, near the vending machines, her back to me. She had her phone pressed to her ear, her hand cupped over her mouth to muffle her voice, but the room was quiet and sound carried. I watched her. I studied her posture. Her shoulders were hunched, tense. She wasn't grieving. She was working. I focused, trying to read her body language since I couldn't hear the words. She was nodding frantically. Then she stopped. She listened. Then she started shaking her head aggressively. I saw her mouth the word no, then cancel, then everything. Who calls to cancel appointments when their son is dying? You call family. You call your husband. Tyler's father died years ago. You call a priest. You don't call someone and argue with them. She hung up and immediately dialed another number. Her fingers were flying across the screen. She looked desperate. Not sad desperate. Cornered animal desperate. She turned slightly and her eyes locked with mine across the room. She froze. For a second, we just stared at each other. The air between us crackled with unspoken knowledge. She knew that I knew. She knew I had switched the plates. She knew that I was the target. And I knew that she was terrified, not because her son might die, but because if he survived, he might talk. Or because if he died, the autopsy would find the poison she had bought. She put the phone in her purse and walked toward me. She smoothed her skirt, put on that familiar, condescending smile, though it wavered at the edges. "Audrey," she said, her voice tight, "have you heard anything?" "No," I said coldly. She sat down next to me, too close. I could smell her perfume, lavender and something old like mothballs. "I've been calling Dr. Harrison," she said, "Tyler's specialist, to let him know." "Tyler doesn't have a specialist," I said. "He goes to a general practitioner once a year for a physical." Phyllis blinked. "Well, for his stress. He's been seeing someone for his stress. I thought it was important they know." Lies. Effortless, slippery lies. She was inventing a medical history for him in real time. Why? To explain the seizure? To set up a defense? "Who are you really talking to, Phyllis?" I asked. She stiffened. "I don't know what you mean. You're confused, dear. The shock is making you paranoid." "I saw you," I said. "You said cancel everything. What were you canceling?" She reached out and patted my knee. I recoiled as if she had burned me. "The house cleaners," she said smoothly. "I told them not to come today because of the emergency. Honestly, Audrey, you need to calm down. You're acting very strange. People are staring." She pointed a manicured finger at a nurse at the desk who was glancing our way. Phyllis was doing it again, painting the picture. The crazy wife. The unstable pregnant woman. She was building the cage around me, bar by bar. The double doors swung open, and a doctor in blue scrubs stepped out. He looked tired. He scanned the room, holding a clipboard. Family of Tyler Grant? I shot up from my chair. Phyllis was slower, but she recovered quickly, rushing to the doctor's side before I could get there. "I'm his mother," she said, grabbing the doctor's arm. "Is he okay? Is my baby okay?" "I'm his wife," I said, stepping up beside her. The doctor looked at both of us, then nodded. "He's stable for the moment, but his condition is critical. We had to intubate him to help him breathe. He's experiencing severe organ distress. His kidneys and liver are showing signs of acute failure." Phyllis let out a gasp. A theatrical hand went to her mouth. "Oh, God, oh, my poor boy." "We're running a toxicology panel," the doctor continued, his eyes sharp. "But that takes time. We need to know exactly what he ingested in the last few hours. Time is a factor here. If we know the toxin, we can administer the correct antidote." He looked directly at me. "Mrs. Grant, do you know what he ate for breakfast?" Phyllis jumped in before I could open my mouth. "He just had eggs," she said quickly. "Scrambled eggs and toast, maybe some orange juice, standard breakfast." She turned to look at me, her eyes wide and warning, a silent threat. "Keep your mouth shut." "Just eggs?" the doctor asked, writing something down. "Any medications? Supplements?" "No," Phyllis said, "nothing." She was letting him die. She was withholding information that could save him because revealing it would implicate her. She would rather let her own son die of liver failure than admit she put poison in the food. I looked at the doctor. Then I looked at Phyllis. I thought about the text messages I hadn't seen yet but knew existed. I thought about the way she treated me like an incubator for an heir she planned to steal. "That's not true," I said. My voice was shaky, but loud enough. Phyllis's head snapped toward me. "Audrey, don't—" "He ate a special herbal blend," I said, locking eyes with the doctor. "His mother made it. She put herbs in the eggs. She said it was an old family recipe." The doctor stopped writing. He looked at Phyllis. "What kind of herbs?" Phyllis laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Oh, for heaven's sake, it was just a little parsley and basil. She's been very confused lately. The pregnancy brain is terrible." "It wasn't parsley," I said. I felt a surge of adrenaline. It was dark. It smelled bitter, like licorice and dirt. And she made a tea, too, a thick, dark tea. "Ma'am?" The doctor pressed Phyllis. "We need to know. If it was a concentrated herbal supplement, it could interact with—" "It was nothing," Phyllis snapped, losing her cool. "Just garden herbs." "She's lying. She's hysterical. Look at her. She's shaking." "I'm shaking because you poisoned him," I yelled. The entire waiting room went silent. The receptionist stopped typing. A security guard by the door stood up straighter. Phyllis's face went from pale to red in an instant. She stepped into my personal space, her finger inches from my face. "How dare you?" she hissed. "How dare you accuse me of hurting my own son? You're sick, Audrey. You need help. Dr. Harrison was right about you." "Who is Dr. Harrison?" the ER doctor asked, confused. "Her psychiatrist," Phyllis lied seamlessly. "She's been having episodes, paranoia, delusions." I stared at her. She was good. She was terrifyingly good. She had an answer for everything. She had a fake doctor lined up. She had a narrative. "I'm not delusional," I said to the doctor. "Test his blood for herbs. Test for poisonous plants. Whatever you find, it's not eggs." The doctor looked between us. He didn't know who to believe, the frantic mother or the shaking, pregnant wife. But he was a doctor. He dealt in data. "We'll run a broad-spectrum plant toxin screen," he said, closing the clipboard. "Thank you for the information." He turned and went back through the doors. Phyllis turned to me. The mask was gone completely now. Her eyes were dead. "You have made a very big mistake," she whispered. "A very, very big mistake." I backed away from her. "I'm not the one who poisoned him, Phyllis." "No," she smiled, and it was the coldest thing I had ever seen. "But you're the one who switched the plates, which means, if he dies, you killed him." The air in the waiting room had turned solid. It felt like walking through invisible gelatin. Phyllis didn't scream or lunge at me again. Instead, she did something infinitely worse. She crumpled. She brought a trembling hand to her forehead, let out a soft, broken sob, and leaned heavily against the registration desk. It was a masterclass in victimhood. To the nurses, the security guard, and the handful of other patients, she wasn't a poisoner being confronted by her victim. She was a grieving mother dealing with a hysterical, mentally unstable daughter-in-law. "I'm so sorry," Phyllis wept, her voice just loud enough to carry. She looked at the head nurse, a stern woman with glasses. She's not herself. The pregnancy has been very difficult. Dr. Harrison warned us about the psychosis, but I didn't think it would happen here. Not today. I stood frozen. My hands were balled into fists at my sides, shaking so hard my knuckles burned. Psychosis. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. If I screamed, I proved her right. If I attacked her, I proved her right. If I cried, I was unstable. "I am not psychotic," I said, but my voice sounded thin, reedy. It lacked the authority of a woman in control. It sounded exactly like the voice of a woman who was losing her mind. "She is lying to you. She fed him poison." Phyllis turned to me, tears streaming down her face. Real tears, or close enough. "Oh, Audrey, sweetheart, nobody is poisoning anyone. You're confusing your dreams with reality again. Remember yesterday? You thought the mailman was spying on you." I gaped at her. "I never said that." "See?" Phyllis whispered to the nurse. "She doesn't remember. It's the toxicity levels, or the hormones. Please, just don't let her hurt herself. She's carrying my grandchild." That was the kill shot. My grandchild, not her baby. She was claiming ownership of the only thing I had left. The head nurse looked at me. Her expression shifted from curiosity to professional pity. She picked up the phone. "Security, we have a disturbance in the ER waiting room, code gray." "No," I said, backing up. My heel caught on the carpet seam and I stumbled. "No, don't call them. You need to listen to me. Check the eggs. Just check the damn eggs." "It's okay, honey," Phyllis cooed, stepping toward me with outstretched arms. "We're going to get you some help. We'll get Dr. Harrison down here." I looked at her eyes. Beneath the tears, they were dry and hard as flint. She wasn't sad. She was winning. She was building the walls of the asylum around me, brick by brick, right here in the lobby of Mercy General. 2 security guards materialized. They weren't police. They were hospital contractors in ill-fitting beige uniforms, but they had belts with radios and an air of tired authority. "Ma'am, you need to lower your voice," the taller one said, stepping between me and Phyllis. "She's lying," I pleaded, looking at him. "She's trying to have me committed to cover up a crime." "Okay, ma'am, let's just take a breath," he said, using the tone one uses with a drunk person or a toddler. "Why don't you come with me? We have a quiet room. You can sit down, get some water." "I don't want water. I want the police." "We can call the police if you want," the guard said, clearly lying to pacify me. "But first, we need to clear the lobby. You're upsetting the other patients." He placed a hand on my elbow. It wasn't aggressive, but it was firm. He was guiding me away from the exit, away from the doctors, away from Phyllis. I looked back. Phyllis was still at the desk, talking to the nurse in hushed, urgent tones. She was pointing at me, then tapping her temple. The nurse was nodding, typing something into a computer. They were creating a file, a record. Audrey Grant disturbance. Possible psychiatric episode. I let the guard lead me into a small, windowless consultation room off the main hallway. It smelled of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. There was a round table, 3 chairs, and a box of tissues. "Just sit tight," the guard said, standing in the doorway. "Doctor will be in shortly to assess the situation." "I'm not the patient," I argued, sitting heavily in the chair because my legs finally gave out. "My husband is the patient." "Right. Just relax." He didn't close the door, but he stood in the frame, arms crossed. I was a prisoner. I put my head in my hands. The adrenaline was starting to curdle into cold dread. I was trapped. Phyllis was out there, unsupervised. She was probably calling the specialist, Dr. Harrison. She was probably calling Tyler's lawyer. She was spinning the web. I needed to call someone. I needed help. I reached into my purse for my phone. My hand grasped empty air. Panic, sharp and sudden, spiked in my chest. My phone. Tyler had taken it 3 weeks ago. "To help you detox from the stress, babe," he had said. Social media is bad for the baby." I had argued, but he had just taken it, locked it in his office safe. I was alone in a hospital room with a security guard blocking the door, no phone, no allies, and a mother-in-law who had just successfully framed me for insanity. Wait. My hand brushed against the fabric of my coat pocket. There was a hard, rectangular weight there. I froze. The ambulance ride. The chaos in the living room. When I had knelt beside Tyler to check his breathing, his phone had slipped out of his jacket pocket onto the rug. I had picked it up without thinking. Pure instinct to clear the area, and shoved it into my own pocket before the paramedics arrived. I glanced at the guard. He was looking down the hallway, bored. I slowly, carefully, slid the phone out of my pocket, keeping it hidden under the table. It was Tyler's sleek, black smartphone. The screen was cracked slightly at the corner from where it hit the floor. I pressed the side button. The screen lit up. A picture of us from our wedding day stared back at me. He looked so happy. I looked so trusting. It made me want to vomit. Swipe to unlock. I swiped. A keypad appeared. 6 digits. Okay? Think. What would Tyler use? I typed in his birthday. 041289. The phone vibrated violently in my hand. Incorrect passcode. My heart hammered against my ribs. Okay, not his birthday. Our anniversary? I typed it in. 061522. Incorrect passcode. Sweat pricked my hairline. I glanced at the guard. He shifted his weight, looking at his watch. I had to be fast. If Phyllis knew I had this phone was the key. It had the texts. It had the proof. Think, Audrey. Think. Who does he love? Who does he actually listen to? Phyllis. I typed in her birthday. I knew it because she made us celebrate it like a national holiday. 082165. The phone paused for an agonizing second. I held my breath. Incorrect passcode. iPhone unavailable. Try again in 15 minutes. No, I whispered, the sound escaping before I could stop it. You say something, ma'am? The guard asked, turning his head. I shoved the phone back into my pocket, my heart thumping so hard I thought he could see it through my coat. No, just talking to myself. Right, he said, turning back to the hall. 15 minutes. I had a brick in my pocket. I couldn't call a lawyer. I couldn't call my friends. I couldn't even call a taxi. And in 15 minutes, Phyllis would have successfully convinced the doctors to sedate me. I couldn't wait. I had to leave. I had to get to the house. The evidence, the herbs, the notebook I suspected existed, the special tea bags, was all there. If Phyllis got home first, she would bleach the kitchen and burn the trash. I would have nothing but a locked phone and a diagnosis of paranoia. I stood up. My knees popped. Where are you going? The guard asked, not moving from the doorway. Restroom, I said. Pregnancy bladder. Unless you want me to do it right here on the floor. He grimaced. He was a middle-aged guy, clearly uncomfortable with anything related to female biology. Right. Down the hall, second door on the left, but come right back. Of course, I said. I walked past him, keeping my head down. I felt his eyes on my back. I walked to the restroom door, opened it, and let it slam shut. I counted to 3. Then I opened it a crack. The guard was looking the other way, toward the ER entrance where a commotion was starting. I could hear Phyllis's voice. She was shrill, demanding. I need to see my son. Why won't you let me back there? She was distracting them. It was perfect. I slipped out of the restroom and turned right, away from the waiting room, toward the ambulance bay exit. I walked fast, my sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. I expected a hand on my shoulder at any second. "Mrs. Grant, stop." I pushed through the automatic doors and the cold air hit me like a slap. I was outside. I was free. But for how long? I scanned the parking lot. Phyllis's car was there, a pristine white Mercedes parked crookedly near the entrance. My car wasn't. Tyler had sold my Audi 2 months ago, claiming we needed the money for investments. I was stranded. I started walking toward the main road. I had to get away from the cameras. I had to get away from Phyllis. I made it to the sidewalk on the main boulevard. Traffic was whizzing by, uncaring, oblivious. I felt small. I felt exposed. I was wearing yoga pants and a stained, oversized sweater, clutching a purse that contained nothing of value except a locked phone. A yellow taxi was idling at a red light. I didn't wave. I ran. I knocked on the back window. The driver, a guy with a thick beard and a turban, looked startled. He unlocked the door. I threw myself into the back seat just as the light turned green. "Whoa, lady, you okay?" "Just drive," I gasped. "Please, Oak Ridge Drive." He hesitated, looking at me in the rearview mirror. He saw the hospital wristband I still had on. He saw the panic. "You got money?" he asked. "Meter starts at $5. Money. I reached for my wallet. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped it on the floor mat. I scrambled to pick it up. I pulled out my debit card, the joint account. I stared at the plastic. If I used this, Phyllis would get an alert. Tyler had set up notifications for every transaction over $10. Audrey Grant spent $25 on taxi services. She would know exactly where I was going. She would beat me there. "No," I muttered. "Not the card." "Cash only then," the driver said, eyeing me suspiciously. "Machine's broken anyway." I dug through the zippered pocket where I kept emergency cash. I prayed I hadn't spent it on decaf coffee last week. My fingers brushed paper. I pulled it out. A 20. 2 ones. And a handful of quarters. $22. The ride to the house usually costs $30. "I have $22, I said, my voice trembling. "How far will that get me?" He looked at me in the mirror. He saw the pregnancy bump. He saw the fear. He sighed. "It'll get you close enough," he said, and flipped the meter on. I slumped back against the vinyl seat. I watched the hospital disappear behind us. I was leaving my dying husband alone with doctors who didn't know he was poisoned. I was running away. It looked like guilt. It looked like flight. But I have to get the evidence, I told myself. If I don't get the evidence, none of this matters. I gripped the door handle. Every red light felt like a personal attack. Every minute sat in traffic was a minute Phyllis could be finishing her performance and heading home. The taxi dropped me off 2 blocks from my house. The meter had hit $22, and true to his word, the driver had pulled over. "Good luck, lady," he said as I handed him the crumpled bills. I walked the rest of the way. The wind was picking up, biting through my sweater. My neighborhood, a collection of mock Tudor mansions and manicured lawns, felt hostile. The windows of the houses looked like dark eyes watching me. I reached my driveway. The house loomed over me. It looked different. Yesterday it was a prison. Today it was a crime scene. I walked up the front steps. My hand went to my keychain. I inserted the key into the lock. It turned. I pushed the door open. The alarm pad on the wall immediately started beeping. Beep, beep, beep. The sound was piercing in the silence. 30 seconds until the sirens went off. 30 seconds until the security company called Tyler's phone, which was in my pocket, and then called the police when he didn't answer. I reached for the keypad. Wait, Tyler changed the garage code last week. Did he change the house alarm code too? He had been so secretive lately, changing passwords, locking drawers. Beep, beep, beep. The tempo was increasing. I stared at the numbers. The old code was 1985, the year Phyllis was born. Of course. Would he change it? If he wanted to lock me out, he would. But he hadn't expected me to leave the house today. He expected me to be carried out on a stretcher. 10 seconds. I punched in 1985. The pad turned red. Invalid code. Panic exploded in my chest. He had changed it. Of course he had. He was preparing to sell the house. He was preparing to get rid of me. 5 seconds. The beeping was a continuous whine now. Think, what did he change the garage code to? The date we met. He had said it with a smirk. Sentimental, right? October 12th, 1012. My fingers flew across the keys. 1012, enter. The beeping stopped. The light turned green. System disarmed. I slumped against the wall, gasping for air. The silence rushed back in, heavy and oppressive. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I looked into the dining room. The table was exactly as we had left it. 2 chairs pushed back, a shattered mug on the floor. And there, sitting on the placemat like a smoking gun, was the plate of scrambled eggs. Cold, yellow, and laced with death. I had made it. I was inside. But I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that I wasn't alone. The ghost of their conspiracy was in every corner, and I had to find the body before the executioner came home. I bypassed the dining room table. I couldn't look at the plate again, the yellow mound of eggs that was currently dissolving my husband's liver. I needed the source. I needed the packaging. I ran into the kitchen. It was pristine, of course. Phyllis had wiped the counters before she left. The stainless steel appliances gleamed under the recessed lighting, mocking the chaos inside my head. I went straight to the tall, brushed metal trash can in the corner. I stepped on the pedal. The lid hissed open. Inside, it was mostly empty. A few paper towels, a banana peel, and right at the bottom, beneath a layer of wet coffee grounds, a crumpled brown paper ball. I didn't hesitate. I reached in, my hand sinking into the cold, damp coffee sludge. I grabbed the ball and pulled it out, my fingers stained brown. I smoothed the paper out on the counter, my hands shaking so hard I almost tore it. It was a small, artisanal paper bag, the kind you get from high-end apothecaries or farmers markets. The label was handwritten in elegant, looping cursive. White snake root, dried. Caution. Toxic if ingested. For ornamental use only. Beneath that was another wrapper, clear plastic this time. Moonflower seeds. I stared at the label site 136-170. White snake root. I remembered reading about that in history class. It was what killed Abraham Lincoln's mother. It caused milk sickness. It caused tremors, vomiting, and eventually organ failure. And Phyllis had put it in my eggs. Ornamental use, I whispered. My voice sounded jagged in the empty kitchen. She hadn't just bought poison, she had bought it from a specialist. She had sought it out. This wasn't accidental food poisoning from bad chicken. This was biological warfare. I grabbed a Ziploc bag from the drawer, fumbling with the box, tearing the cardboard, and shoved the wrappers inside. Then, thinking fast, I ran back to the dining room. I scooped the cold, poisoned eggs from Tyler's plate into a second bag. I sealed it tight. The smell of licorice and decay wafted up, making me gag. I had the weapon. Now I needed the motive. I stood there in the kitchen, clutching the bag of poison against my chest, and suddenly the last 3 months crashed into me. The memories didn't come as a movie. They came as sensations. The violent, rib-cracking vomiting that started exactly 8 weeks into the pregnancy site 12. The way my hands would shake when I tried to hold a glass of water. The dizziness that made the hallway floor tilt like the deck of a ship. I remembered Phyllis hovering over me with a bowl of soup. "Eat up, sweetheart, you're too thin. The baby needs strength." Site 52. I remembered the taste of that soup. Bitter, earthy. I had complained about it, and Tyler had rolled his eyes. "My mother is cooking for you every day, Audrey. Stop being so ungrateful. Real women handle morning sickness better than this." Site 15. Real women. I spat the words out into the empty room. It hadn't been morning sickness. It had been a low dose. A testing phase. She was calibrating it. She was seeing how much I could take before I broke. She was poisoning me slowly, day by day, spoon by spoon, while smiling that benevolent, grandmotherly smile. And Tyler, he had watched. He had held my hair back while I retched bile and poison, and then he had told me I was pathetic. Site 14. Had he known? The question felt like a physical weight in my stomach. Had he known he was holding a dying woman, or did he just think I was weak? I looked at the bag of white snake root. Ornamental. No. He knew. He had to know. You don't live in a house with a murderer and not notice the bodies. I needed proof of the plan. The wrappers proved poison, but they didn't prove intent to frame me. For that, I needed paperwork. I needed the digital trail. I ran to Tyler's home office at the back of the house. The door was heavy oak, and naturally, it was locked. Tyler had started locking it 3 months ago, claiming he had sensitive client files lying around. I tried the knob. Locked tight. Damn it, I hissed. I checked the top of the door frame. Nothing. Under the rug. Nothing. I didn't have time to pick a lock. I didn't have time to be subtle. I ran to the garage. The air was cold and smelled of gasoline. My eyes scanned the tool bench Tyler bought for show and never used. There, hanging on a pegboard, was a claw hammer. I grabbed it. It was heavy, the rubber grip cool in my palm. I ran back to the office door. I raised the hammer. My arm was shaking, not from weakness, but from rage. I swung. Crack. The metal claw slammed into the wood right next to the handle. Splinters flew. The sound was deafening in the quiet house. I swung again and again. I channeled every ounce of fear, every moment of humiliation, every "you're just hormonal" comment into those swings. The wood around the latch gave way. I kicked the door hard, right near the lock. It flew open, banging against the inner wall. I stood in the doorway, breathing hard, the hammer hanging from my hand. I had broken the house. I had broken the rules, and it felt good. The office was dark, the blinds drawn tight. It smelled of Tyler's expensive cologne and dust. I went straight to the desk. I pulled open the drawers. Pens, staples, a stress ball. Nothing incriminating. I checked the filing cabinet. Locked. I jammed the claw of the hammer into the gap and pried. The cheap metal bent with a screech. I ripped the drawer open. Tax returns, house deed, car titles, boring, bureaucratic life. "Where is it?" I whispered. "Where is the real stuff?" I spun around, scanning the room. The bookshelves were filled with business books Tyler had never read. The Art of War. Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Then I saw it. On the bottom shelf, tucked behind a row of oversized architectural digests, was a black moleskin notebook. It didn't belong. It wasn't a printed book. I pulled it out. It was simple, unassuming. I opened it. It wasn't Tyler's handwriting. It was Phyllis's. I recognized the sharp, angular loops from the birthday cards she sent me, the ones that always contained a check for $50 and a subtle insult about my weight. I flipped through the pages. It wasn't a diary. It was a log. August 12th, dosage 2 milligrams. Subject reported nausea within 40 minutes. Vomiting duration, 2 hours. August 15th, dosage 3 milligrams. Subject complained of dizziness. Stayed in bed until noon. Tyler is annoyed. Site 186, 187. I felt the blood drain from my face. I wasn't a person to her. I was subject. I kept reading. September 1st, dosage increased. Mixed with ginger tea to mask bitterness. Subject consumed 80%. She was tracking the efficiency of her murder attempts. She was refining the recipe. I turned the page to October. October 3rd, physical intervention required. Subject is becoming resistant to bed rest. Need to accelerate instability. Plan, the stairs. 10 Saat Gam. Site 31. I stopped breathing. October 3rd. That was the day I fell. I closed my eyes and I was back there. I was at the top of the landing, holding a basket of laundry. Phyllis was behind me. I had felt a shove, not a bump, a shove. I had tumbled forward. The world had spun. My shoulder had slammed into the drywall. Phyllis had screamed, "Oh my goodness, Audrey, you're so clumsy," Site 2633. And I had believed her. I had apologized. I had apologized to the woman who pushed me. I looked at the notebook again. Result, bruising on right shoulder. Subject is fearful. Tyler reinforced the clumsy narrative. Good response. Good response, I read aloud. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and angry. They had graded my pain. They had scored my trauma like it was a gymnastics routine. This wasn't just greed. This was sadism. She enjoyed it. She enjoyed watching me fall. She enjoyed watching me apologize for my own abuse. I flipped to the back of the notebook. The handwriting changed. It was messier, rushed. Tyler's handwriting, Site 196, asset liquidation schedule. There was a list, my properties, the ones my father had left me, the ones I had kept separate in the trust. 1. Lake House, list for quick sale, estimated $1.2 million. 2. Downtown commercial block, sell to shell company, estimated $4.5 million. 3. Trust fund, power of attorney required. Underneath power of attorney, circled 3 times in red ink, was a name, Dr. Harrison, and a date, November 15th. That was next week. Notes. Once subject is committed for psychiatric evaluation, Minier 72 hours, temporary POA activates, transfer funds immediately to Cayman account ending in 4421, Site 38133. They weren't just going to kill me. Death was messy. Death invited autopsies. They were going to drive me insane. They were going to use the poison to mimic psychosis, the shakes, the paranoia, the hallucinations from the moonflower seeds, and then lock me away in a facility. I would be sitting in a padded room, drooling and confused, while they sold my father's legacy and drank champagne on a beach. $18 million. Site 1997. That was the total at the bottom of the page. That was the price of my life. That was the price of my sanity. I heard a sound, gravel crunching, an engine idling. My head snapped up. I looked through the slats of the office blinds. A white Mercedes was pulling into the driveway. Phyllis was home. The sound of the car door slamming in the driveway echoed through the house like a gavel strike. I stood frozen in the center of Tyler's decimated office, the hammer in one hand and the black notebook in the other. She's here. My heart slammed against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. I looked at the office door, the wood splintered, the lock hanging by a screw. There was no hiding this. If Phyllis saw this room, she would know the game was up. And a cornered animal is the most dangerous kind. I heard the front door open. The alarm keypad chimed, a cheerful little ding-dong announcing her arrival. Audrey? Her voice drifted down the hallway. It wasn't angry. It wasn't panicked. It was smooth, melodic, terrifyingly calm. It was the voice she used when she was offering me tea. Audrey, sweetie, are you here? I saw the alarm was off. I stopped breathing. I pressed my back against the bookshelf, clutching the notebook so hard the corners dug into my palm. I needed to get out. But the only way out of the office was into the hallway, which led straight to the foyer where she was standing. I brought you some fresh clothes from the hospital, she called out, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. Click, click, click. Approaching. I know you must be so confused running off like that. Dr. Harrison is on his way to meet us here. He just wants to talk. Dr. Harrison, the closer. The man who would sign the papers to lock me away. She had brought reinforcements. I scanned the room, the window. I rushed to it, unlatching the lock. I pushed up. It didn't budge. Painted shut. Of course. Tyler hadn't opened a window in this house in 3 years. Audrey, I hear you moving around in there. The clicking stopped. She was listening. She was maybe 20 feet away. I looked at the French doors on the other side of the room. They led to the back patio. They were glass. If I opened them, she would hear the latch. But if I stayed, I was dead. "Audrey, don't be difficult," Phyllis said, her voice dropping an octave, losing the sweetness. "You're only making it worse for yourself." I made a choice. I shoved the notebook into the waistband of my maternity leggings, pulling my sweater down to cover it. I gripped the hammer. I turned the lock on the French doors. Click. "Audrey?" The footsteps accelerated. She was running now. I threw the doors open and stumbled out onto the stone patio. The cold air hit me, biting through my thin sweater. I didn't look back. I ran. I didn't run down the driveway. That's where she would look first. I ran toward the back of the yard where the overgrown hydrangeas separated our property from the Millers. I wasn't a runner. I was 5 months pregnant, dehydrated, and carrying the weight of a shattered life. My lungs burned. My belly felt heavy, pulling me down with every step. I pushed through the hedge, branches scratching my face, tearing at my clothes. I stumbled onto the neighbor's lawn, gasping for air. I didn't stop. I kept moving, keeping to the shadows of the trees, navigating the suburban labyrinth like a fugitive. She's calling the police right now, I thought. She's telling them I'm armed. She's telling them I'm having a psychotic break. She's telling them I broke down the office door with a hammer. And the worst part? It was all technically true. I made it to the next street over. I forced myself to slow down. A running pregnant woman draws attention. A walking pregnant woman just looks tired. I walked. 1 block, 2 blocks. My hands were freezing. I realized I was still holding the hammer. Jesus, Audrey. I looked around. A storm drain. I crouched down and shoved the hammer through the grate. I heard it splash into the water below, evidence of my violence gone. But I still had the notebook. I still had the poison samples in my pocket. I needed a safe place. I needed witnesses. I needed somewhere public where Phyllis couldn't drag me into a car without a scene. The Roasted Bean. The coffee shop on Main Street. It was a 20-minute walk. I started moving, wrapping my arms around myself to stop the shivering. The coffee shop was warm, smelling of roasted beans and cinnamon. It was busy. Students on laptops, moms with strollers, normalcy. It felt alien. I went straight to the back, near the restrooms, out of the direct line of sight from the windows. I sat at a small, wobbly table. I needed Mr. Warren, my father's lawyer, the only person on the planet who was paid to be on my side. I pulled out Tyler's phone. Still locked. Try again in 45 minutes. I cursed silently. I looked around. I couldn't ask a stranger to borrow their phone to call a lawyer about an attempted murder. That screams crazy person. I saw a discarded local newspaper on the table next to me. I grabbed it, flipping through the ads until I found it. Warren and Associates. Family Law and Estate Planning. I memorized the number. I walked up to the counter. The barista was a young guy with a nose ring. "Hi," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I lost my phone. Can I please use the landline? It's an emergency. I need to call my lawyer." He looked at me. He saw the scratches on my face from the hedge. He saw the hospital bracelet I had forgotten to take off. "Store policy says no customer calls," he recited, bored. "Please," I whispered. I leaned in, desperation leaking out of me. "My husband, there was an accident. I need to call our lawyer. Please, just one call." He hesitated. He looked at the manager in the back office, then back at me. He sighed and lifted the receiver of the beige phone behind the counter. "Make it quick. If the boss sees, I'm toast." "Thank you." I grabbed the phone, my fingers trembling as I punched in the number. Ring, ring, ring. "Warren and Associates. How may I direct your call?" "Mr. Warren," I gasped. "I need to speak to Mr. Warren. It's Audrey Grant. Audrey Davis." "One moment, Mrs. Grant." The hold music was classical violins. It sounded like a funeral. "Audrey?" Mr. Warren's voice was deep, grandfatherly. "I tried calling you yesterday. Your number was disconnected." "They blocked you," I said, tears finally spilling over. "Mr. Warren, you have to help me. They poisoned him." "Phyllis poisoned Tyler, but it was meant for me. I'm at the Roasted Bean on Main. I have proof. I have a notebook. Please, you have to come." "Audrey, slow down. Poisoned? Who?" "Phyllis. She's trying to kill me for the inheritance. She's going to have me committed. You have to come now. She knows I'm gone." There was a pause, a lawyer's pause. He was assessing. "Stay there," he said firmly. "Don't talk to anyone. Don't leave. I'm 10 minutes away." I handed the phone back to the barista. "Thank you," I said. "Thank you so much." "You okay, lady?" he asked, eyeing me with concern now. "I'm fine," I lied. "Just a bad day." I needed water. My mouth tasted like copper and bile. "Can I get a bottle of water? And maybe a bagel?" I hadn't eaten since the poisoning attempt. My blood sugar was crashing. "Sure, $5.50. I reached into my pocket for the debit card, the one I had saved from the taxi ride. I swiped it on the terminal. Processing. I watched the little spinning circle. "Please, just give me this." Declined. The machine beeped a harsh rejection tone. "Weird," the barista said. "Try it again." I swiped again. Declined. Card reported stolen. Retain card. "It says it's stolen," the barista said, his voice changing. He looked at me differently now, not as a victim, but as a criminal. "I'm supposed to keep the card." "No," I said, snatching it back. "It's my husband's. He must have canceled it by mistake." "Ma'am, if the card is stolen—" "It's not stolen," I snapped. "My name is on it." People were looking. The moms with the strollers had stopped talking. I was the crazy woman shouting about a credit card. Phyllis. She had moved fast. She had called the bank. She had reported the card stolen. She was cutting off my oxygen. She wanted me penniless, hungry, and stranded. "Forget it," I muttered. I turned away, leaving the water on the counter. I walked back to my table and sat down. My stomach growled, a painful, hollow sound. I had $18 million in assets, and I couldn't buy a bottle of water. 10 minutes dragged like 10 years. Every time the door chime rang, I jumped, expecting to see Phyllis or the police. Finally, the door opened, and a silver-haired man in a wool coat walked in. He carried a leather briefcase and looked entirely out of place among the bean bags and espresso machines. "Mr. Warren." I waved weakly. He saw me and rushed over. His face fell when he saw the state of me, the dirty clothes, the messy hair, the exhaustion. "Audrey," he said, sitting opposite me. "My God, what happened?" "They tried to kill me," I said flatly. I didn't have the energy for hysterics anymore. "Phyllis made breakfast, poisoned herbs. I switched the plates. Tyler ate it. He's in the hospital, dying of liver failure." Mr. Warren stared at me. "Tyler is dying?" "Yes. And Phyllis, she didn't care. She only cared that the plan failed." I reached under my sweater and pulled out the black notebook. I slammed it onto the table between us. "Read it," I said. "Page 42, the plan to commit me. Page 10, the dosing schedule." Mr. Warren put on his reading glasses. He opened the book. I watched his eyes scan the pages. I watched his expression shift from skepticism to horror to a cold, professional rage. "White snake root," he muttered, reading Phyllis's handwriting. "Moonflower seeds. Subject is becoming resistant." He looked up at me. This is premeditated attempted murder and conspiracy." "There's more," I said. "Look at the back, the assets." He flipped to the back. He saw the list of properties. He saw the plan to liquidate everything within 6 months of my institutionalization. "They were going to sell your father's building," he said, his voice quiet. "The one he built with his own hands." "They were going to sell everything," I said, "and leave me to rot in a cell." Mr. Warren closed the notebook. He placed his hand on top of it, claiming it. "You were right to call me," he said, "and you were right to run." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a file folder. "When you told me about the herbs on the phone," he said, "something clicked. I did some digging on Phyllis a few years ago when you first got engaged. Your father asked me to. Just due diligence." "You never told me," I said. "I didn't find anything then. Her record was clean. But I remembered something about her first husband, Richard." "Tyler's stepfather," I said. "He died of a heart attack." "That's what the death certificate says," Mr. Warren said. He slid a paper across the table. It was a copy of an obituary from 7 years ago. "But look at the text." I read it. Richard Miller, 55, passed away suddenly after a brief illness. Symptoms included fatigue, tremors, and confusion. "Tremors," I whispered. "Confusion." "I made a call on the way over," Mr. Warren said, "to an old friend in the coroner's office in that county. There was no autopsy. Phyllis refused it. She insisted on immediate cremation." My blood ran cold. She burned the evidence. "She got away with it once," Mr. Warren said grimly, "and she taught her son how to do it. But this time, we have the notebook, and we have Tyler." "Tyler is in on it," I said, pointing to the notebook. "That's his handwriting in the back." "Yes," Mr. Warren said, "but Tyler is currently lying in a hospital bed poisoned by his own mother. If he wakes up, he's going to be very motivated to talk, especially if he knows we have this." He tapped the notebook. "We're going to the police," Mr. Warren said, standing up. "Now, and we're going to get a blood test for you to prove you've been dosed over time, and then we're going to bury them." I stood up. I felt a flutter in my stomach. The baby. "Let's go," I said. "I'm ready to fight." The precinct smelled like old paper and despair. Mr. Warren led me through the glass doors, his hand firm on my elbow, acting as a shield against the chaos of ringing phones and uniformed officers. We sat in a small interview room with Detective Martinez. He was younger than I expected, with tired eyes and a coffee stain on his tie. He didn't look like a savior. He looked like a bureaucrat who wanted to go home. "Let me get this straight," Martinez said, leaning back in his chair. "You're saying your mother-in-law poisoned your husband by accident, but she meant to poison you to induce insanity so she could steal your inheritance?" It sounded ridiculous when he said it aloud. It sounded like the plot of a bad movie. I felt a spike of panic. He doesn't believe me. "It wasn't an accident that she poisoned the food," I said, my voice shaking. "It was an accident that Tyler ate it. And you have proof?" I placed the Ziploc bag on the metal table. The brown paper wrapper inside was stained with coffee grounds, white snake root. "I found this in the trash," I said, "and I have the notebook." Mr. Warren slid the black moleskin across the table. Page 10, Detective. Dosing schedules. Page 42, Financial liquidation plans. Martinez opened the book. He put on a pair of reading glasses. The room was silent, save for the hum of the air conditioner. I watched his eyes move. I watched his jaw tighten. He wasn't bored anymore. He flipped to the back. "This handwriting changes," he noted. "That's my husband," I said. "Tyler. He was helping her plan the asset sale." Martinez looked up at me. "So your husband was conspiring to have you committed?" "Yes." "And now he's in the hospital?" "Yes." Martinez closed the book. He picked up his desk phone. "Get me the lab," he said, "and call the DA. We need a warrant for 1242 Oak Ridge Drive. Now." He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw respect in his eyes. "Mrs. Grant," he said, "you need to come with us to the hospital. We need you to identify the suspect." The ride to the hospital was a blur of lights and sirens. I sat in the back of the cruiser, separated from the front by a wire cage. It felt wrong. I wasn't the criminal, but I felt like one. I had broken down a door. I had stolen evidence. I had run away. Martinez's radio crackled. "Dispatch to Unit 4. "Go ahead." "Hospital lab confirms the presence of trematol in the patient's blood. High concentration. It matches the chemical profile of white snake root. I closed my eyes and let out a breath I had been holding for 3 hours. Tremetol. The poison from the plant. It was real. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't hormonal. I was right. "Copy that," Martinez said. "What's the patient's status?" "Patient is conscious but critical. Renal failure is advancing." Tyler was awake. "Step on it," Martinez told the driver. I looked out the window. We were passing the park where Tyler had proposed to me. He had hired a violinist. He had cried when I said yes. Was it all a lie? I wondered. Even then, I thought about the notebook. Researched for 6 months. Yes, it was all a lie. Every kiss, every smile, every "I love you." It was just a long con played by a man who loved his mother's approval more than his wife's life. We swept into the hospital like a storm. Martinez, 2 uniformed officers, Mr. Warren, and me. The nurses at the station looked up, alarmed, but Martinez flashed his badge and kept moving. "Room 304, he said. We reached the door. I could hear Phyllis's voice inside. She was soft, cooing. "It's okay, baby. Mommy's here. You just need to rest. The bad food is out of your system." I felt a surge of nausea. She was still doing it, still playing the role. Martinez pushed the door open. Phyllis spun around. She was holding a washcloth to Tyler's forehead. When she saw the uniforms, her eyes went wide. When she saw me, they narrowed into slits. "You," she hissed. "You have some nerve showing your face here after what you did." "Step away from the patient, ma'am," Martinez said, his voice hard. "Excuse me?" Phyllis drew herself up to her full height. She was small, but she had the presence of a queen. "I am his mother. I am caring for him because his wife abandoned him to run around town." "I didn't abandon him," I said, stepping into the room. "I went to get the evidence you tried to hide." Tyler was lying in the bed, pale as the sheets. Tubes ran into his nose and arms. He looked at me, his eyes glassy and confused. "Audrey," he rasped. "Where were you?" "I was at the house, Tyler," I said. "In your office." Phyllis flinched, just a tiny twitch of her left eye. "Officers, please remove her," Phyllis said, her voice rising. "She's having an episode. She's dangerous." "The only dangerous person in this room is you, Mrs. Grant," Martinez said. He held up the evidence bag with the wrappers. "We found the white snake root." The color drained from Phyllis's face so fast it looked like a magic trick. She went from indignant to gray in a second. Tyler looked at the bag, then he looked at his mother. "Snake root," he whispered. "Mom, you said it was just mild sedatives to make her pliable." "Shut up, Tyler," Phyllis snapped. The sweetness was gone. The mask was incinerated. "You said it was just to make her look sick." Tyler's voice cracked. He tried to sit up, but the effort made him gag. "You didn't say it would kill her." "It wouldn't have killed her if you had just stuck to the plan," Phyllis screamed at him. "But you're weak. You've always been weak. You let her switch the plates." "I didn't know," Tyler cried. "I was checking my email." "You were supposed to be watching her." "I was making tea." "Enough!" Martinez shouted. The room fell silent. The confession hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. They had just argued about the logistics of my murder in front of 3 police officers. I walked to the side of the bed. I looked down at the man I had married. "You wrote the liquidation plan," I said softly. "I saw the notebook. You were going to sell my father's building." Tyler looked at me. Tears were leaking from his eyes. "Audrey, we needed the money, the business. I made bad trades. I lost everything. Mom said this was the only way." "So you decided to lock me up?" I asked. "To make me think I was crazy?" I thought you'd be safe in the facility," he sobbed. "I didn't want you to die. I just wanted the money." "That's not what the notebook says," I said. Phyllis's notes regarding disposal were very clear. I looked at Phyllis. She wasn't crying. She was staring at Tyler with pure disgust. "You pathetic little worm," she spat at her son. "I should have let you rot in that studio apartment where I found you." "Phyllis Grant," Martinez said, pulling his handcuffs from his belt. "You are under arrest for the attempted murder of Audrey Grant, the poisoning of Tyler Grant, and conspiracy to commit fraud." He spun her around. She didn't fight. She didn't scream. She went rigid. "Tyler Grant," Martinez continued, looking at the bed, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and fraud. An officer will remain in this room until you are medically cleared for transport to the county jail." Phyllis looked at me as Martinez marched her toward the door. "You think you won?" she asked. Her voice was ice. "You're all alone, Audrey. No parents, no husband, no family. You have nothing." I put my hand on my stomach. The baby kicked, a strong, defiant thump. "I have everything," I said. "And you?" "You're going to die in a cage." She sneered, but I saw the fear behind it. The realization that she had lost control. The realization that her perfect plan had been dismantled by the one person she underestimated. They dragged her out. I heard her start to argue about her rights in the hallway, her voice fading. I looked at Tyler one last time. He was weeping into his pillow, muttering, I'm sorry. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I felt light. The weight was gone. "Mr. Warren," I said, turning to my lawyer. "Yes, Audrey? I want a divorce, and I want a restraining order, today." "Consider it done," he said. 3 months later. I sat on the balcony of my new apartment. It wasn't a mansion. It was a 3-bedroom condo in the city, close to the best pediatric hospital. The sun was warm on my face. I looked down at the breakfast on the table. Scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice. I picked up the fork. For a second, just a split second, my hand hesitated. The trauma was still there, a ghost in my muscle memory. Is it safe? Then I remembered. I bought the eggs. I cooked them. My door was locked. My security system was top of the line. I took a bite. It tasted like freedom. The last 3 months had been a whirlwind of legal battles. Mr. Warren had been a shark. Phyllis was denied bail. The investigation into her first husband's death was reopened after they found the notebook, and they found enough residue in his exhumed remains to charge her with a second count of murder. She was looking at life without parole. Tyler was recovering, but his kidneys were permanently damaged. He would be on dialysis for the rest of his life, a life he would spend in a minimum security prison. He had taken a plea deal, testifying against his mother in exchange for 15 years. I didn't go to the hearing. I sent a victim impact statement that simply said, he broke the only thing that mattered, my trust. I sold the house on Oak Ridge Drive. I couldn't live there. Too many ghosts. I used the money to set up a trust for the baby and to donate to a shelter for victims of domestic abuse. I looked down at my stomach. I was huge now, 8 months along. A little girl. I was going to name her Hope. Cliché? Maybe, but accurate. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from Mr. Warren. Final decree signed. You are officially Audrey Davis again. I smiled. I put the phone down. I took another bite of eggs. Phyllis was right about one thing. I was alone. But she was wrong about what that meant. Being alone didn't mean being weak. It meant being safe. It meant that for the first time in years, the only person controlling my life was me. I finished my breakfast. I washed the plate, and then I started to plan the nursery. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.